The silence of my house had become my closest companion after the funeral, after the endless condolences, after the cold nights that never seemed to end, and I had accepted it as my new truth. No longer a wife, no longer touched, no longer wanted not, even by life itself. I filled my days with routines that numbed, and nights with wine that burned but at least dulled the edge of memory. And then on a Tuesday, when the sky hung grey and heavy, there came a knock that did not belong to the mailman, nor the neighbour, nor anyone I expected. And when I opened the door, I found him standing there, tall and broad-shouldered, with a duffel bag slung over one arm, and those eyes that looked too closely and saw too deeply. "Mrs. Dalton," he said softly, "I'm sorry for just showing up like this, but the dorms are closed for the break, and my folks are out of town, and your son said I could crash here, if that's okay." And though I hadn't seen him in almost a year, I remembered the way he used to linger around our home, like he belonged, like he already knew all the corners and shadows and secrets of it, of course. I said, though my voice cracked more than it should have, and I stepped aside as he walked in, bringing with him a storm I didn't recognize until it was too late. He dropped his bag near the stairs and looked around with a half smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Everything's the same," he said, and I nodded, though I wasn't sure what he meant or why my heart began its slow, unfamiliar ache. That night we barely spoke, and yet I couldn't stop hearing the way his footsteps creaked on the hallway floor, the way the shower ran just a little too long, and when I passed his open door, I saw him shirtless muscles, taut from years of football, practice and sweat glistening down the curve of his back. I didn't mean to look, I told myself as I turned away, but my body hadn't felt heat like that in so long, and the memory of it followed me into my sheets like a ghost. The next morning, he was in the kitchen making coffee, like he had always lived here, and when I reached for the same mug, our hands brushed and lingered too long, too deliberately, and his eyes met mine, and something in them burned and flickered and warned me. He stepped closer than he should have and said, "You look different, not older, just different, like you finally see people again." And I couldn't answer because his hand was already brushing hair from my cheek and my knees were already too weak to protest. And when his lips touched mine, it wasn't soft or hesitant. It was need. It was hunger. It was the shattering of every promise I had made to myself in the lonely cold of widowhood. I pushed him away, but my hands trembled, not from anger, not from shock, but from desire that I had buried too deep and too long. And he looked at me like he knew. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Unless you're not." And then he left the room, leaving me with a heart that pounded, and skin that still tingled, and a war inside me I hadn't prepared to fight. The days that followed blurred into each other, like wet paint on glass, streaked and vivid and dangerous. He was everywhere in the house, in the air, in my thoughts. He cooked with me, cleaned with me, laughed in that easy way that made it feel like nothing hurt anymore. And every glance, every brush of fingers, every almost accidental touch made my skin hum with a tension I couldn't shake. At night, I'd hear him in the room beside mine, and I'd lie awake with memories of my husband and the ache of guilt, tangled with the ache of something else, entirely something hot and alive and waiting. It was late when it happened, and I don't even know what drew me from my bed. Maybe the sound of rain, maybe the silence that felt too loud, or maybe just the unbearable heat beneath my skin, and I found myself standing at his door, staring into the dark, and before I could knock, he opened it like he'd known I was coming, like he'd felt me there all along. Neither of us spoke as he stepped aside, and I walked in, and the door clicked closed behind me like a seal, breaking like a line crossed, and I wasn't afraid I was already burning. He reached for me slowly, like I might vanish, and when his hands touched my waist, I melted against him like wax drawn to flame, and his lips were on my neck, my collarbone, my chest, and I gasped against his mouth as we stumbled toward the bed. Limbs tangled, breath stolen. His body covered mine with reverence and hunger, and I didn't feel guilt. Only a wild, furious sense of being alive again. His fingers explored the curves of me that had been forgotten. His mouth whispered heat along my skin, and when he entered me, it was like a part of me had been waiting for this, to remember what it meant to be wanted. We moved together slowly at first, then faster, desperate like two storms colliding. And every sound, every moan, every shudder was a confession, a surrender, a promise that we had both already broken and rebuilt. Afterward, I lay against him, his arms wrapped around me like they belonged there. And I knew the world would not understand, that my son could never know that grief had rules, and I had broken them. But in that moment, wrapped in warmth and breath and the scent of him, I knew I hadn't sworn off love. I had only been waiting for it to find me again, and it had knocked when I least expected it. Now it was in my bed, in my heart, in every part of me that dared to feel again. And I wasn't sorry. Not anymore.